Welcome to So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. Are you evaluating your career in real estate? Feel like you're ready for a fresh start? Or ready to take your career to the next level? This is your podcast. Welcome back to So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. I'm your host, Meredith Fogle, and I am here with a face I don't think that we have seen on the podcast before, right?
Nope.
Okay, so this is Felicia Kaminker, who is opening up a property management division for us here. And ever since I told people that we were doing this, everybody has been asking me about it, being like, oh, I've always thought about doing property management, and what does it take, and what does it look like to do property management or open a property management division? And people also asking me, well, what's the difference between leasing a property, helping a landlord rent a property, or helping a tenant find a property, and property management? And there is a very distinct difference. Now, keep in mind as you listen, we're in Maryland, so there are jurisdictionally different rules and regulations throughout the country. If you're listening outside of the country, certainly different. So keep that in mind and know when we talk, I'm talking Maryland, we're talking Maryland here.
Yes.
Although Felicia comes from a background doing this in another state. So that's been one of the things, is figuring out what's different, right? You've had to kind of learn.
Exactly. It's been an interesting journey.
Right.
Coming from a state that was very pro-tenant, and I would say not saying that they weren't supportive of owners, but tenants' rights are number one. I find here in the area, it's similar. And I am for that. I've been a former tenant. I have friends that are tenants. There's many reasons that people don't buy that lean on renting, their financial stability, or they're just not ready. And I think that's where I would like to make a change from some of my previous work, in the sense of the welcoming and the balance of responsibilities to both the owner and the tenant, through communication, through ethics, through transparency. I think we live in a wonderful area that we can provide this boutique service to clients on both sides, because they do become a client. Tenants become a client, and the goal is long-term tenancies, because that makes owner happy, and that makes a family or whoever it be moving into a property very happy that they can call that their home versus just a rental.
Yeah, really good point. Now let me ask you on the question that I mentioned before, what's the difference between leasing a property and property management? Can you kind of talk the audience through that?
Absolutely. So the activity of leasing is basically the marketing and the showing and the leasing up of the property. For those owners that just want that service, that's what's done, or the landlords. Property management is full service, relationship based, giving owners peace of mind. Where as a company, we take on all the communication. The owner then is hands off, not when it comes to voicing what needs to be done with the property, but they're not going to be the ones getting that midnight call. We will. They're not going to be the ones that have to facilitate the maintenance. We take care of that. So those are just little snippets of giving the owner. Many owners I've worked in the past like to go off the grid and want to be the wedding, their children's wedding. They don't want to be dealing with maintenance. That's where property management comes in, because it should be seamless, and we should give the owners peace of mind.
Yeah. Okay. So here, at least, I know it's different in different areas. The way I kind of think of it is, although we have, full residential real estate services as well as some commercial services, what our role is when a landlord comes to us, or we go to a landlord and they're saying, we want you to rent the house for us, is my job has always been, because we didn't do property management until now, was to say, okay, I'm gonna market the heck out of it. I will find you a tenant whose terms fit your needs, and we'll, get that tenant plugged in with a viable lease that, the terms are agreed to between both parties. And then sometimes I would say, so what are you doing about property management, right? And so the landlord would go, well, what are my options? And I'm like, well, there are, companies you can use, or lots of landlords self-manage. What I found is so many of the times that I had this conversation, people chose to self-manage, but then a couple months in, they're like, never mind. because they're getting that call in the middle of the night, or they're getting that call. I always joke about when I used to have rental properties, it was always like on Christmas Day or in the line in Disney World, like when you're almost on the ride. Always. Never failed. And so that was why we finally enlisted property management, because it was just not worth it for us to have that kind of like hassle factor. And we also never felt comfortable like just popping over and checking on the property, even though we should have been. Now we know that. But it just felt like a weird situation, whereas the property manager, that's what they do. They take on those burdens for you. So now the way that I see it, it's kind of like this seamless relationship where I'll come in and you come with me, and we talk to the potential landlord, and we explain what my role is, what your role is, how it's all, a very seamless process. And then the other beautiful thing is when the landlord is ready to re-rent or potentially sell the property, it all stays with you as the agent. So when you have a partnership with a property manager, that's the beautiful part of it as well, because remember, the property manager is the one who is interfacing with the tenant, who may be a future buyer, with the landlord, who might be a future seller, and the property manager who is in good partnership with you and has a valid agreement with you to return that future listing to you, that client to you, will make sure that they're peppering in reminders. So, make sure you call Meredith when you're ready to do that. Okay, well, have you talked to Meredith yet? When the lease is starting to come to an end. So it helps with that as well.
Exactly. I think that it's just a normal flow. It is something that as a property, once the home is turned over to property management, we will know the home best. We will know what it needs. And the fantastic part of that is when they do sell, it'll be turned back, and minus some normal wear and tear, it'll be turned back in the great shape that it was, because that's the best part of being property management, is making sure the tenant is doing what they've signed on to do, and that the owner is making that home livable and safe. And so we just bring all of that together, and when it's time, then we turn it back.
Yeah. And you also help with things like managing the walkthrough, key transfer, utility setup, collection of rent.
It's a lot of details.
Issues at the final walkthrough. So I want to talk about a few questions that landlords often have, and some pain points, and see how you address these. And this is having been a landlord and having dealt with clients who are landlords, some of the things that they have encountered. So first of all, sometimes as an agent, we go to a potential listing and the potential seller says, well, I might list it for rent and I might list it for sale. I'm not really sure which one makes the most sense. So as an agent, I don't know if you guys listening have ever had this experience. I'm sitting there trying to do my best to run through numbers with them, but then I'm also but you really need to talk to your financial advisor or your tax accountant and see how this affects your long-term and big picture financial situation and goals. So when we bring you in, tell me what that looks like.
So in bringing that in, I usually will counsel just as you do and speak with the owner in the sense of there's many things that need to be done to prepare the home for property management, in the sense of, have you considered an LLC? Because if the tenant were to hurt themselves, there is a liability issue there. So LLCs, we discuss also insurance, the fundamentals that safeguard that maybe investors, we don't want them to lose their personal wealth over a business, because the minute a property becomes a rental, it becomes a business. And it has to be, and this is where that relationship of when someone says, oh, I'm going to self-manage, there is a very fine line there. And that's when it starts to be gray, where when you have a professional property management firm come in, it is business. And of course, there is that communication, and we do have empathy for whatever is going on in their life. But we know that there is a list that we have to follow, a process that has to be followed to protect both parties. So those are some of the discussions. Of course, walking through the home, safety measures, everything that, again, you would want your brother, sister, parent, child living in a home that's safe.
And do you make recommendations for things that you're based on what we know a tenant would expect?
Yes.
Do X, Y, Z to get the house ready.
Absolutely. I've had owners who've said, well, I'm not leaving the washer and dryer. And I will say, then it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to get it rented because that is a norm that should come with a property. Nobody wants to run out in the middle of the day and do their laundry at a laundromat. So that is something, when we talk about just basic appliances, yes, a dishwasher is, especially if you have a number of people moving in. So there's just things. And again, the marketability of the home is based upon what the home represents. And that's why the listings have to be accurate that are online. That's where the communication and the questions and answers fall in play.
Yeah, makes total sense. All right, so talking about like some of the pain points or some of the things that I know come up for people.
Sure.
Let's go to what we've referenced a couple of times, which is like that call that happens in the middle of the night. So if somebody is self-managing, we know what that looks like already. They're scrambling, they're calling their insurance company, maybe something tragic has happened, or they're calling trying to get a contractor first thing in the morning if something is, just not working. What we often have heard from landlords are things like the heat didn't kick on and it's the first really freezing day, or the AC didn't kick on, it's the first really brutally hot day. And those things tenants need taken care of immediately. Yeah. So what happens on the property management end when property management is in place?
Sure. So we have a phone line which the tenant would call in on. It is answered. And traditionally, if it's something in the middle of the night, like the water, something's happened with the water line, it's broken, a sewer backup, those are the things that we already have information from the owners. Where's the water shut off? Where's the gas shut off? And we will calmly instruct the tenant, okay, here is the water line shut off. They should have that information already. Shut off the water first thing in the morning. We'll be there with a plumber. So we have a nice you should always have an established list of licensed, bonded, insured vendors, and help them understand the relationship of, this isn't something that we're going to say, oh, we'll see you next week. It is an immediate concern. There are laws that revolve around these timelines, and it is our job to say, okay, if you can't be there within 24 to 48 hours, we have to go to our next person.
Yeah, okay. So I heard you mention a couple of things here. One is a process, it sounds like, for handling this kind of thing. And secondly, an established list of vendors that you can rely on. And I think the third thing was a call service, or somebody who can actually pick up the calls in the middle of the night. And then even having like what you said about knowing where the water shut off is. So these are things like, as the agent, these are things I would not necessarily know when I'm listing a house for rent. It's not a checklist that I go through. So if you're thinking about being a leasing agent, if you don't have property management as a partnership, you're going to have to figure this out on your own, I guess, right? Put all these things together. But it's what I'm always interested in is that this feels like a very different skill set, almost the way that like residential and commercial are kind of different animals. These are different animals as well. And I think the mistake some agents make is thinking that they can do both things. Now in Maryland, you can't do both things. You're a property manager for our brokerage at least, or you're a real estate agent.
Yes.
But the property management company has its own set of special skills, including what you've just mentioned, that I think a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, it's based on my experience, it is timeliness. It's detail oriented. I think the owner intake form that I have is about 4 pages long. We have to know all those things in order to proceed. Again, no surprises.
Yeah.
And things happen, and that's where that communication and transparency come in.
Well, and what you just said about no surprises, I think that's the other big thing that I hear from landlords all the time is they're surprised by either, something that the tenant has brought up as an issue that really wasn't an issue. So let me give you a story on this one and see how you react to this. If you're interested in learning how to become that go-to local real estate expert all the sellers call to give you their listings, read Farming for Real Estate Agents. You can pick up your copy today on Amazon, Kindle, on Audible, or anywhere you get books. This was a house that I rented on behalf of a landlord many years ago. And it was an older home in Bethesda. They did not have property management, and the tenant moved in having walked through, they had an agent, done all the things. We have, an organizationally mandated walkthrough form. It is not a property management one, it's in our MLS, or our organization rather. and checked off all the things, assuming they checked all the boxes and tested everything. About maybe 2 months in, when the weather started to get cold, they felt that the windows were drafty. And the temperature was hard to regulate in the house. Nothing was broken, but the windows were certainly drafty.
Yes.
This went down the longest tunnel that you can even possibly imagine, with a tenant refusing to pay rent because they felt like something wasn't disclosed. The landlord's like, well, I lived there for 14 years. I don't care. Like, it didn't seem all that bad to me. He's like, nothing was broken. That's just the way these windows are. So we have an Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs. I don't know if everybody has those, but we do here. And it ended up being escalated to that level where they stepped in and had to like mediate this issue between the landlord. And in Maryland, it's really hard to evict anybody, and it was not evictable. But it was a real issue. And that owner at that point was like, next time I rent this, I'm getting a property manager in here. What's your take on that, hearing that story? How would you have handled that as a property manager?
So we do a very thorough walkthrough of the property ahead of time. Is it cold? Do we know? We don't know those things. But when tenants do say, hey, it's very drafty in the baby's room, that's the last thing we want to hear. So there's solution sets. There's reaching out to the owner and saying, so the tenant has brought this up. Was this ever an issue in the past? Some say yes, some say no. As an owner of a home, sometimes we overlook things that we're used to. It is our job to find those things or have that communication with that tenant. Oh, okay, let me talk with the owner about it. Simple solutions at that time could be either having a handyman come out and recaulk the windows or putting the plastic up. But with them being drafty, there will need to be a time that perhaps the windows need to be refitted or work done. It's always about, when we work with owners, talking about reserves and budgets is always I won't say prickly conversation, but it's basically, you have to, God forbid we had another COVID or something that tenants are not liable for rent because of this national situation. Owners have to be prepared. And prepared for big maintenance items like doing the windows. So I know I deviated a little bit there, but it's basically that part is communication and getting the owner to see the value of doing the necessary needs to keep the tenant happy. Because if they're great tenants and rent's coming in and the place looks spotless, why would we ever want to push them away?
Yes, true.
Long-term tenancies are fabulous because they care for it like it's their own home. Plus, it reduces the cost associated with the wear and tear of move-in, move-outs.
And paying another rental commission.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think it's very important to talk about those things, not push it away. Tenants need to be responded to. Owners need to have a conversation, a safe conversation about what the expectations are and what needs to happen.
And I want to kind of take it back to what you said before about once a property is a rental, it becomes a business. I thought that was fascinating that you said that. I never thought about it that way. But being able to have that conversation, especially if you're in that situation where somebody's like, should I rent, should I sell, not really sure, for you to use that verbiage. And I think, again, so important to bring a property manager in who understands the logistics of what that business looks like, and asking about things like reserves, things that we don't think about, asking about, the major systems in the house. Let's talk about ages. Let's talk about known issues with those things. Let's talk about what your anticipated date of replacement is going to be on those things. Let's talk about, your average check-ins on those things. What is the cost of that? Because I think that's one thing. Certainly landlords don't think about the cost of re-rental and improvements between tenants, but I think they also don't think about maintenance costs over time, especially in aging property. So those are all things that you kind of like project for people, run the numbers and help them understand.
Exactly. I will use them as a basis. I will be, so you've lived in the home now for 10 years. Tell me about what your services have been over the last 10 years. Do you service your AC, HVAC system every year, twice a year for the heating system and the air conditioner? When was the last time the windows were updated? Those, going through all of that information and coming back to the business statement. A lot of people that I've worked in the past have taken their family and gone to Europe. And it's an exciting time with the known that they're going to come back probably in 4 or 5 years. So that home is still their home.
Yeah.
And when they hear business, and it has to be broached very carefully, because the mural that the daughter did on the wall that means everything to them, they don't want to repaint that.
Right.
So those are crucial conversations that have to have understanding, and you have to listen, and then, you know, from there devise a plan saying, well, here's the thing, not everybody's going to cherish the mural the way that you do. If that is a deal breaker for, and we cannot rent your property, I'm going to make some suggestions.
Yeah.
And that trust
Yeah.
is where then you go to a deeper level, talking more about the business aspects of it.
Well, and being able to think things, keep those sorts of things in mind. You're reminding me of once we had one where, you know how people measure their kids like on the door frame?
Yes.
So we had one like that, and we actually had a contractor come cut out
Yes.
that piece of door frame and
That's
take it.
very much
And then-
so.
Yeah, because it was like they didn't want that painted over. We knew a tenant
Yes.
was not going to want all the kids' measurements on their
Yeah.
kid's closet door. But it was precious to the landlord who was coming back.
It
Really
is.
interesting.
And on that same note, we have a lot of owners that will say, oh, we have a bed or a
Oh,
piano
yeah.
that we don't want to move out of the house. It's just too much and we don't know where to put it. My recommendation always is to empty everything from the home.
Mhm.
Everything, and that includes, don't leave lawn equipment behind. Things like that are liabilities. Don't leave brackets on
Yeah.
walls.
Yeah.
Start with a clean slate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do get people asking all the time, well, can I rent it furnished? How don't people want that? What's your take on that?
There used to be a fantastic furnished market back in the day, and we're speaking, I think, 2016 through 2018, when people were reloading for jobs.
Okay.
Markets change, things
Yeah.
have changed.
Yeah.
What I've seen the trend is people bring their own.
Me too. And if they're relocating, often
Yes.
the company is furnishing
Yes.
the entire house.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So I
with very
don't,
good-looking stuff.
I think on a short-term basis, yes, but on a long-term basis, again, business-wise, because if you leave things behind like the TV, if it breaks, we can't blame the tenant.
Right.
But guess what, owner? You have to replace it because it's part of the house.
Yes,
So let's
yes.
strip away and make this risk-free to some degree. Let's make this peace of mind and just set you up for success.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me ask you about what it looks like at like move out time, because this is the other pain point that I often
Yes.
encounter both with my own rentals that I've had and with landlords, is that crucial moment happens where there's been a security deposit kept against damage by the tenant. And like I have a situation like this right now where the property's been rented and the tenant has moved out and left some stuff and didn't really clean it. And the lease
Yes.
says that it was to be professionally cleaned. So the landlord said to me, well, what do you think is reasonable for me to keep back from the security deposit to get her stuff out and to get the place cleaned? And you tell me if I'm wrong. I said, well, based on what I think you need a receipt. You need to have it cleaned, and you're going to have a junk removal company or whoever it is to get the stuff. Then you have the receipt to deduct. So I see this happen all the time.
Yes.
And then there's like this fisticuffs that happens between the two parties that then as the agent, even though you're supposed to have stepped out of the relationship, you still want to keep the relationship strong with the landlord. So you're of course going to step in and help to mediate this, but it can get kind of hairy.
hairy.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. And even before that security deposit, that's why it's important to do inspections. Move-in inspection, tenancy, 6 months in, there's always got to be a record, not just a signed report, but pictures. So HUD actually has guidelines on this. There are many links that you can look up. There are a certain number of years, the lifespan of a fridge, the lifespan of carpet.
Yeah.
Carpet's a big one. With paint even. So they actually make you do a formula where you have to depreciation, and then that is the number.
Okay.
So it's not as easy saying, oh, they ruined the carpet, they're going to pay for all my carpet. No, they're not going to. If anything, if there is a section of it, it can be cut out and redone.
Do you explain that to a landlord when you first do the
Yes.
walkthrough, especially if you see the carpet's kind of worn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because some carpets are just at the point of 13 years or even 8 years, not very attractive. And also most tenants prefer not having carpet because carpet holds germs, carpet holds just things over the years, smoke, whatever it be. Of course, we're smoke free, but that's where I will make recommendations to the owners, and they'll think about it. And that's the important part, is having those trusted relationships with vendors that you can say, we give a lot of business to this vendor. Why don't you go talk to them and drop our name and see if they'll help you out?
Yeah. Well, and setting expectations, I think that's the big piece that you're,
Yes.
and because you know this world so well, you know all the things that could happen. So kind of like us, when we're talking to a seller or a buyer, we set the proper expectations, we walk them down, all the possible paths so that we're under promising, over delivering, and helping them see what, potential issues could arise and how we're going to help them through it. You're doing the same thing, but in a completely different world, which again, I think is so important. So if something does arise at the end, you can say, okay, remember how we had the discussion about the carpet? So here's what we're going to do. Let's run the formula. Let's kind of see what makes sense here. And then you can get the carpet estimate for new carpet and then use the calculation to actually make a claim from the security deposit. Okay, good. Last question I have for you, I think, is going back to that question, should I rent, should I sell? Here's what I usually say to people, and I am interested to hear your take on it. I usually say to people, there are a few reasons that people sometimes consider renting. One is if it is, an obvious cash cow and you don't need the proceeds from that property to go into another property, maybe a good idea. And also think about your tax implications, because you'll have capital gains if now you haven't lived in the house for 2 of the past 5 years of current tax laws. 2, you might come back to it, right? Like that's another one. Or 3, it's bigger. It's part of a bigger investment portfolio, and you kind of don't care if you take a gain or a loss from it because you were an investor, and this is one of the many doors that you're adding.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think those are all conversations to be had. I usually will talk to them as far as financially. I'll talk to them about, okay, is the mortgage paid off? Do you have a good interest rate? And they're like, that's one of the reasons we want to hang on to the property. We have this golden, and I'm like, that's great. Then hang on to it. And it, when we walk through, I'll be able to identify if there's any things that need to be changed. And when I say changed, I don't mean, oh, let's knock a wall down, let's redo a kitchen. It's not. Every rental, I feel, has a place. It's just, again, expectations of what kind of money do they want to put into it. There's sometimes I've gone to homes and they are like, well, we're going to redo this and this. And I'm like, you can do it if you want. It's not necessary. Yeah. So talking about money is it's very important. And giving them options and understanding their motivation behind why they want to make this step. And understanding it is emotional. And we take on a lot of that so that when we present it back to the owner, they can have a clear, concise understanding of how everything is going to be taken care of.
Good. Okay. Great information. This has been so good. Felicia, anything else that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
I am just, if there are individuals that are looking to do property management, either from becoming a property manager to trusting a company with investments, communication, transparency will always win.
Yes.
Always win, even when it's bad news.
Right.
It's always, unfortunately, you just have to deliver it in a way that is clear and concise.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. If people want to reach out to you with questions, is that okay, first of all?
Absolutely. I have over 8 years experience in a different market, but a lot of it translates the same way. So I am more than happy to answer questions, field emails, and go from there.
What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Felicia at lstpropertymanagement.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys for being here, watching or listening today. We hope this has been helpful, a little bit of a different subject matter, but something that we've been talking about a lot. And like I said, had lots of questions on. So feel free to reach out to us. If you are watching this or listening on social media, you can message or DM us with additional questions. And if you would be so kind as to subscribe to our show if you're watching on YouTube, and also to leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you are watching or listening on. We would be so, so grateful. This has been So You Want to Be a Real Estate Agent. Felicia, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here as well. We will see you next time.